Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just gave you a couple of updates from fall camp. We'll do it again tomorrow with a number of different things coming out early today and likely later today as well. So we'll break it all down for you on tomorrow's show as you need to know it. But let's get into a little bit of a headline catch up. There are a number of things that happened over the last couple of days, week or so that I want to break down for you all. And we'll start in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where there was a little bit of an interesting conversation over the last week or so. It sounds like Ward Manuel, the AD over at Michigan, had offered Jim Harbaugh the position to be the honorary captain for that Week 1 matchup against Fresno State on August 31st. He has declined that offer. It sounds like he is not going to be there. It sounds like he's going to stay and prepare for that season opener for the Chargers against the Raiders on the 8th. So, not overly surprising to me. I think it's one of those things that you get into this year, and frankly, I thought this would have been kind of funny. I understand there were people that were really mad about it, said that he shouldn't be invited back until, 4 years or whatever the distinction is. But at the end of the day, it would have been kind of funny if Jim Harbaugh was the only head coach on the sideline because Sherrone Moore got suspended. But at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting to kind of watch this develop. He said he didn't want to be a distraction to this team, and I understand that. I think it's probably the right decision for everyone involved that he is not on the sideline because you don't get some of that bad press that you likely would have gotten if he was, and maybe you don't have a situation where your head coach isn't even on the sideline, but your former head coach is. So definitely would have been a very interesting situation there, but overall I think a good decision from Harbaugh. I think Michigan probably should have waited a little bit longer, but it doesn't necessarily matter. At the end of the day, excuse me, I apologize. When he walks into that stadium, whenever he does as an honorary captain, which will be happening at some point here in the next year, 2 years, I don't know, but it will be happening, I can promise you that. Whenever it does happen, it's going to be a crazy standing ovation. So I fully understand getting that juice behind the team as they head into the season, and I get why Michigan did this. I thought it would have been kind of funny to see come to fruition, but overall, probably the right decision from everyone involved to not have this happen, and definitely the right decision for Jim Harbaugh to kind of leave himself out of that for the time being, at least. Moving on, Deion Sanders made some headlines, and imagine that. He does that quite often, and a lot of that is because he is who he is. But it sounds like Deion got a question. Well, actually, the question wasn't the problem by any means. The person, who he worked for, was the problem. But it sounds like a CBS reporter was at the press conference. A lot of you might have seen this video, and he tried to ask a question about this upcoming season. Said he was from CBS Denver, or CBS Colorado, I can't remember. And and Deion cut him off. Said he wasn't going to take his question because what CBS did was foul, is the way that he put it. I don't know what this is about. A lot of people have pointed to Deion being ranked second to last in the Big 12 head coaching rankings. Frankly, I wouldn't have him that low, but that should not make him mad. If that is what really caused this to happen, then he can't talk to anyone because there are enough people and at enough agencies around the country that have written articles that are not glowing about Deion Sanders as a head coach. I can promise you that, so I can't imagine that's the reason. The other reason that has been thrown out there is they did some reporting on Shiloh Sanders filing for bankruptcy. I don't know what that real full story is there, but overall, when I read the article, it looked like reporting to me. I don't know if that, rubbed Deion the wrong way or there was something in there that wasn't fully accurate. I don't know. But at the end of the day, from where I was sitting reading that article, didn't look like there were too many problems with it. But he's from a different lens. There's no two ways about that. He also got into it with another reporter when they asked about the O-line chemistry going into this year, and he said, you can succeed and work with a lot of people you don't have chemistry with. He's absolutely right about that point. There's no doubt about that. You can definitely do that. He could have just answered the question. He could have just said, they're coming along, they're finding their way, and moved on. But at the end of the day, it's Deion Sanders. He's going to do his thing his own way, and there's going to be some of these moments in press conferences that get a number of headlines. Overall, I don't much care about this one. I think it's an interesting story. I think it's one that people will use against Deion. He should answer the question. I'm not here to say he absolutely is totally right for doing what he did, but at the end of the day, I think it doesn't necessarily make too big of a difference, and definitely one of those things that is likely going to happen throughout his career. So overall, I didn't necessarily pull too much away from that, but it's definitely something that gave people on Twitter something to talk about at the very least. Florida is the other team I want to talk about. It looked like they're looking to hire a GM of revenue sharing. So this is something they're consulting with the athletic group, which has worked with a number of different universities to put together a general manager. It sounds like this is going to be a little bit more specific of a role. Billy Napier's in on this. Scott Strickland, the AD right there, obviously is in on this. They're working with a group that worked with the Eagles, or excuse me, Jack Rosenberg was with the Eagles, a former executive for the Eagles, and definitely was a huge help for him. It sounds like they are advising Oklahoma at the same time, so this is likely going to be something that just happens across the country, if I had to imagine. I think when you look at this, big time programs, you now have no cap on what you can do with the staff. You can play around with that thing a ton, and I think they're going to do that a ton. So definitely one of those things that it's a weird position. It's one that I frankly did not know we were going to have here pretty soon, but overall it's one that you're going to see across the country. It's one that you're absolutely going to want, and it's one that definitely, the Texas and Alabamas and Georgias of the world will likely have this in place here pretty soon, because it is a very, very interesting world they're walking into that not a lot of them have a ton of experience in. There's no doubt about that. So definitely one to watch, and would be a very interesting hire, and one that I expect a lot of other schools to follow suit in. Hugh Freeze, I want to talk about here for a second. He got some people mad this weekend. He said he, quote-unquote, should have 4 wins over Nick Saban. He said, Nick Saban is incredible. I should have 4 wins over him. We beat him twice at Ole Miss and went up 24-3 in the third year. I wasn't smart enough to slow it down, and then last year could have easily gone our way. So this made a lot of Bama fans very mad, as you can imagine. Anytime you take a shot at the GOAT, you're going to get a lot of Bama fans very mad at you. He's not wrong. I'll be totally honest with you. When you look at that Ole Miss game back in 2016, they should have won that game. The fact that they didn't win that game is out of this world crazy. They should have been able to just run the ball and roll to a victory in that game. So that he's totally right on. And frankly, Auburn definitely should have won that game a year ago. And there is a very specific reason why they didn't win that game, which is they rushed 2 guys and they dropped 9 in coverage. And I don't care who you are, if you're Jalen Milroe, if you're me, if I'm able to stand back there the entire day and find an open receiver, I'm going to find one at some point. And that was exactly what Jalen Milroe did. So overall, I think, we can talk about should-haves all we want. It doesn't matter. No one cares about should-haves. No one cares about, Ole Miss missing the mark in 2016 and not running the ball down the stretch. No one cares that Isaiah Bond or no one cares that you should have won that game, because Isaiah Bond caught the ball in the corner of the end zone and they won that game and they moved on to the playoffs. So overall, I think it's one of those things that, yeah, he's right. There's no doubt about it. He should have won those games, and it's his fault that they didn't win those games. And also, it's kind of a funny thing where Hugh Freeze hypothetically should have 4 wins over Nick Saban, but he has 2 wins and he has 2 very close calls. That's about as close as anyone's gotten to Nick Saban throughout his career. So Hugh Freeze being the thorn in Nick Saban's side, not necessarily a big thing. Not necessarily a big thorn, because Nick Saban was an absolute dominating force. So even in a world where Hugh Freeze has been the big time problem and has been the thorn in his side, it's not that bad by any means, because Nick Saban was that dominant throughout his career. But moving on to the final one here, Florida State and ACC look like they are heading towards mediation. Obviously, there are a number of different court cases involved in this. There are 2 with Florida State and ACC, one in Florida, one in North Carolina. So definitely one to watch. One of those things that is going to be very, very interesting as we get into it. But we're probably a pretty long way from a conclusion here. We're probably a pretty long way from this thing really being figured out, because from where I'm standing, the ACC has no intention on taking less money, and Florida State has no intention on giving the amount that the ACC wants. So overall, I think it's one of those things that will definitely be really interesting to watch. We'll definitely get into it as it kind of unfolds, and definitely could be something that informs what happens with the ACC going forward. But frankly, I don't think tons is going to change until you have that look-in clause in February of next year with ESPN, because that's when a lot of this stuff really starts to happen. That's when the SEC starts looking in your direction, the Big Ten starts looking in your direction, and maybe starts to tear you down just a little bit. But that's obviously something we can get into. Jim Phillips has been very honest about, they are not budging. They are willing to fight as long as it takes, and he feels that these 2 entities have created a not so great environment in his conference. So I can't imagine it's going to be great conversations. Now, mediation is supposed to be a nice civil conversation where you find a conclusion. I think they'll find something of a conclusion. I don't know how, great they're going to be in terms of conversation. I don't know how kind they're going to be about it. But overall, I think it's going to be a very interesting thing because it's going to inform a lot. It's going to inform how Clemson goes about business and their arguments. It's going to inform how some other teams in the ACC look at this upcoming year and look at the future in the ACC. It's going to inform a lot of the different things that happen around conference realignment, and definitely will be something that matters a whole lot. I think we're quite a ways from this thing being decided by any means, but definitely will be one of those things that I think a lot of people will be checking in on throughout the next couple of months to a year, and we'll figure out what's going to happen with it at the very end. But overall, it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's a step towards, getting a answer for all of the crazy stuff that's going on and getting an answer to all of the insane things that has been happened over this past year. So definitely a good news at the very least. It's a step forward. That's all we really need at the end of the day with this confusion that's going on over at the ACC. Anthony had a question over here. Yeah, I mean, I think I look at Miami as a team that I could put at a number of different places in the top 25. They're as dangerous as they come as you go into the season, so I could put them up, in the top 15, 14 possibly, and then I could possibly drop them down to the 19 range, and I think that's roughly where they were in this ranking. So I think there's a lot of questions there. Obviously, whenever you bring in a number of transfers, there's going to be questions, but if you look at the outright talent, they're one of the more talented teams in the country. If you look at Cam Ward under center, he's one of the most talented guys in the country. So I'd probably have him a little bit higher than the AP poll had him. I believe I did have him a little bit higher, and frankly, they could go up a number of places higher if you really wanted to, because it's going to be a really good team this upcoming year. There are just some questions as you head into it. So maybe it's a little bit of, you'll believe it when you see it with Miami, but frankly, I'm already kind of believing it. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow.